Good morning. How are you? I hope you're well and safe, but it's not easy, is it? The way we're having to live through this coronavirus pandemic, we're just not used to the isolation or living without human contact. I know that some of you who live alone have to cope with this all the time, and those of us who are privileged enough to have partners and families are catching up with what it feels like to live with that kind of isolation and aloneness. Our hearts go out to you. But it's not easy for any of us. We have lots of questions. How long will it go on? When will it be safe to go and visit friends? To hug a grandchild? We have lots of questions but not many answers. We'd love to have some answers, wouldn't we? Of course, the journalists every day at the briefing ask their questions and want answers. And the politicians, we know that politicians often like to escape giving straight answers, but there really are none to be given. None of us knows. We are living with the uncertainty and with the unknown. And we do find that rather difficult, don't we? As Christians, we should be a bit more used to it than we are, because we're called to live by faith and not by sight. Hebrews chapter 11 tells us that faith is the evidence of things not yet seen. But we do find it remarkably difficult. We like to know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. We serve a Lord who taught in parables, rarely gave a straight answer. You had to work it out for yourself. And the Gospels rarely give us a straight answer either. And today's story of that lovely walk by two disciples from Jerusalem to Emmaus, that story is no different. It doesn't give us answers, but it does give us lots of pattern, lots to draw from ourselves. And perhaps more this year than any other year, it could make more sense to us, because it's not just about a journey from a physical place called Jerusalem to another geographical place called Emmaus. It's a journey from shattering, from shattered lives, to hope, to restoration. It's a journey from disappointment, a journey from disillusionment, a journey from fear to love. And so it was that the two disciples, one we know their name, Cleopas, and a companion, set off, bitterly disappointed. We had hoped that he was to be the one to redeem Israel. We had hoped. They were walking on a country walk. They weren't walking through towns. The route from Jerusalem to Emmaus was a country walk. And they were walking along, not particularly looking at each other, but talking about what had happened, what hadn't happened, what might have happened. And somebody drew alongside them as they were walking along the lane. And this somebody was asking questions about what they were talking about, where had they been, and they couldn't believe that this person seemed to know nothing of what they had experienced in Jerusalem. Are you the only one not to know what happened? Are you the only one to know that our friend Jesus, who was called the Messiah, has died? They killed him. Did you not know? And then just this morning, there were some girls who went to the tomb and they said that his body wasn't there. So now he's not only been killed, but his body's been stolen. And the one who was walking alongside them said, "You fools, don't you know what it said in the Jewish scriptures, that this one who was called to be the Messiah was to die and to rise again? Do you not know?" And they carried on walking. And they got to Emmaus, where they were going. They'd left Jerusalem, the place of disappointment. And we are disappointed, aren't we? We have lots of disappointments at the moment. Lots of our things have been cancelled. Lots of our lives have been turned inside out and upside down. There is disappointment everywhere we look. I wonder what you might have been doing today. Oh, I know some of you who would be able would be in the cathedral worshipping God, rather than doing it via a screen. But what other things are you disappointed about? I would have been home 3 days from visiting family in northern Italy, where we'd planned to spend my wife's 70th birthday with the family over there. We were bitterly disappointed when that had to be cancelled and it all fell apart. There will be things that you have been disappointed about too. For those disciples, disappointment was achingly difficult. But they got to Emmaus, and Emmaus became for them a place of enlightenment, a place of renewal. They went into the home, perhaps it was the home of one of them, and they invited the stranger who had drawn alongside them to come and have a meal with them, because it was getting on in time. And inside the house, that stranger they'd invited to eat became the host, broke bread, offered wine, and then they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. As Thomas was to say in another place at another time, "My Lord and my God," the penny dropped, realization dawned, life was renewed. But Jesus left them. Jesus had done what Jesus needed to do, and he left them. Was that fair? Perhaps it wasn't. But what they said to each other was really important. They hadn't recognized Jesus alongside them on the road. And we need to remember that Jesus is alongside us in our disappointment, in our living with uncertainty, living with the unknown through this period of difficulty. Jesus is with us whether we recognize it or not. But they recognized him and realized, hadn't our hearts burned within us as we were walking on the road with that man? They had known, but they just hadn't recognized it. So Emmaus became for them the place of renewal, the place of enlightenment, whereas Jerusalem had been the place of disappointment, the place of shattering. They had moved. They'd moved with Jesus, and Jesus with them. And so they got up and went straight back to Jerusalem. But they didn't go back to the Jerusalem they'd left. They didn't go back to the place of disappointment. They went on to a new Jerusalem. They returned to a different Jerusalem, because they were different. They had Jesus with them, And they knew that. They went to Jerusalem to rejoice with the other disciples, rejoice in the renewal of life and love, because Jesus was risen. Not just risen in that physical sense on Resurrection Day, but risen in their being, risen in their lives, risen in their very existence, because they were different. They went back to a different Jerusalem. And we too will go to a different land. We will not go back to normal, whatever normal was. We will return to a new way of living, a new way of life, with Jesus in our hearts and Jesus in our lives. May God bless you and keep you safe and well.